Hello all, this is NaveenPrabhu. Today I want to show you a game which played between Magnus Carlsen and Anish Giri. This game featured in a Tata Steel round 2 in yesterday's match. The game starts with the Catalan opening on the board. Let me show you the move orders. The game starts with the move 4 and he develops his knight and pushes the c4 and black pushes e6. White develops his knight to f3, and especially in the Catalan, the white bishop for the white is very strong because it will financiate on g2 and controls much activity in the position, as you see in the upcoming moves. As per plan, he moves his pawn to g3 to financiate his bishop on g2, and he develops his king side pieces to castle on the king side, and Magnus financiates his bishop on g2. He castles, Magnus castles, and now he captures the pawn on c4. So Magnus attacks the pawn by playing the move knight to a3. This looks weird because no one will place the knight into the corner of the board. Everyone wants to play it into the center of the board. But to attack the pawn, Magnus played in this way. This also may mess up the pawn structure if the bishop captures the knight on a3. But if the bishop captures the knight, then black will not have a bishop pair for the rest of the game. Interestingly, the pawn can't be guarded by playing the move pawn to b5 because the knight can easily capture the pawn. So to guard the pawn, black have to give up his bishop pair, and I captures. And then the game can be continued by playing the move bishop to d7, and Magnus have a plan to attack his rook, so he played the move pawn to a4. So Magnus has a flexibility to post his bishop on whether b2 or a3 according to the positions. Anish defended his b7 pawn by playing the move bishop to c6 because he don't want any discoveries by moving the knight on f3, which will create an attack on the pawn on b7. So he just guarded it by playing this move, and as per plan, Magnus develops his bishop to a3 to attack the rook, so that he moves to rook to e8, and then the queen comes to c2 to attack the pawn on c4, and now Anish gives up the pawn by playing the move knight to d7. He has a plan. If the queen captures the pawn, then he can just put his knight on b6, but Magnus didn't capture the pawn soon. He just had another attacker to the pawn by playing the move rook to c1, and Anish thought for a while in this position. Nearly 27 minutes he thought in this position and played the move a6. So Magnus captured the pawn on c4. As you see the timings here, the game has been given in the classical format. So Magnus and Anish started the game in the time format of 1 hour 40 minutes each with 30 seconds increment. And you see, Anish has been thinking a lot in this position. It means that he may be seen this position for the first time, or maybe seen a while back and forgot some few lines, or trying to remember a few things. Or maybe Magnus is well prepared in this line because he has just completed his World Championship match 2 months back. His preparation helped him a very lot in this game. And then now he attacks the queen on c4 by playing the move knight to b6. He moves to c3, invites his knight to attack on a4, and he takes the pawn on a4 and moves the queen to b3, and Anish offers a queen trade by playing the move queen to d5, and Magnus have prepared this line really well there is an interesting move to play in this situation. I'll give you a few seconds. You can try it by yourself. I hope you have found this move, that is Rook captures c6. This is an extreme sacrifice. You have to accept this. There is no way. But this is really good for white. It can't be captured with the pawn because the knight will be hanged. So it have to be captured with the queen. And then Magnus moves his knight and gives the discovery to the queen. Queen have to guard the knight. So it's the only move to guard the knight. And offers a queen trade. But Magnus moves his queen away and attacks the pawn on c7. And he defended the pawn with the knight. But actually this is not a great move. The good move in this position is actually you need to place the move knight to b6. Actually, I will show you a sample line in this variation. It actually loses the pawn on b7, but it's good for it continue the equalish game. But knight to d5 gives a major advantage for white. Let me show you a sample line in this variation. He captures the pawn. He wants to trade pieces. I capture. He captures. Now you see the materials. You count the materials now. It's actually equal. You have to give up the material what you have sacrificed before. Now he asks for a trade and he captures, and then it will be continue a equalish game. In this move you can't capture this knight on g4 because if you capture the knight then queen will capture the rook on e8 and it will be checkmate. So rook moves and I trade the knight, captures, and as you see black is just one pawn up, which will be a seemingly drawish position. But actually in the game Anish Giri plays the move knight to d5, which gives a major advantage for white, which invites the white rook to place the move rook to b2, which pushes the queen to the corner of the board because the queen have to guard the knight on a4. The queen have to stay in this diagonal or with this knight. So only these two squares have been covered by the knight. So the queen have to move to the corner of the board by playing the move queen to a5, which is not that great for the queen. The queen is actually in a trappy situation. And now Magnus captures the knight. Now the pawn captures. It will be good if the queen captures it, because you can't stay with the queen on the corner of the board for the rest of the game. You have to get some mobility by playing this move. But this have not happened. He thinks to guard this knight, so he didn't capture with the queen. So he captures back with the pawn. And the rooks goes into the 7th rank by capturing the pawn on b7. And he just pushes the pawn to c5. If the pawn on c5 is accepted either by the knight or bishop or the queen, not knight, sorry for that, either by the bishop or queen or the pawn, then the knight on e5 will be dropped. So we should not capture the pawn. We have to play the move queen to f5. So it will create an attack on the king side. That is, it's attack the square on f7. And Anish have to defend it by playing the move rook to f8. And Magnus just captures the pawn on f7, creating some sort of checks here. And it will create some attacks here. And Anish just plays the move queen to d8. If the queen is accepted there, then the rook will capture the queen on f5. Both will exchange the queen. But Magnus gives him a check. No, he just captures the pawn on c5 and opens some lines for his bishop once the pawn moves. But in this position, you can just give this check. You can't capture this because it's a checkmate, so that it will move, and we can just put this and create some sort of attacks, and we can open this line for bishop sometimes later. But in the game, actually, Magnus captures this pawn, and Anish asks for a queen exchange, and Magnus accepts this. But there is a rule in chess: when you are material down, you will not have to trade queens, because you have to attack the king. When you are material down, you want to win the game, means you have to attack. That's the only hope you have. But in this position, Magnus actually trades the queen, but doesn't matter in this position. It is anyway winning for white, and Magnus gives him check, and there is only one more to go for the king, that is to check. It can't come to the 7th rank because of the rook on b7, and now he pushes the c6 pawn and attacks the rook on f8 with his bishop. The rook comes to attack the pawn on c6. He pushes forward to c7. As you see in this position, white have a rook, bishop and a knight, and black have 2 rooks and a knight. Actually, you see, this rook doesn't even move, have a single move yet. Actually, we have in the 28th move of the game that the rook still didn't move, and it is also out of moves. And now Anish tries some counterplay to maneuver his knight to b5 or give a check in e2. Magnus just plays the move bishop to b2, which will, if the knight moves, it will also lose the pawn on f6. So Anish defends the knight by playing the move d4, and Magnus gives him a check to put his knight on d6. So king moves forward, and Magnus put his knight on d6 and attacks the rook. Anish don't want any discoveries, so just he moves the king forward. And now Magnus didn't capture the rook. He just protects his pawn on e2 by playing the move king to f1, because we can capture the rook anytime. There is no urgency in that. The knight goes back to b5. Now Magnus captures the rook. Rook captures back and pushes the pawn to a4. And then the knight captures the pawn on c7. And then Magnus just captures the pawn on d4. This is really a great advantage for white. The knight comes to e6, and Magnus put his bishop on e3. As you see, Magnus having 5 pawns and Anish having just 3 pawns. That is also 3 pawn islands. This is not great to play as a black. Whereas Magnus having a connected 4 pawns, which will be very useful in the end game. And at this position, Anish Giri resigned and Magnus Carlsen won. This is a wonderful sacrifice in this line. That is the. Let me show. Actually, this is also one of the wonderful sacrifice in the Catalan. I have told you earlier, the Catalan bishop is so strong in the line. This is the starting of the game to get so much interesting. I hope you also enjoyed the game. If you like this video, hit the like button. And if you want more contents like this, keep supporting this channel. Okay, see you in the next video.